Now, let's just give you some insight as to what happens to volume and open interest with the various options. This is really quite interesting. Now, looking at this option chain, you might not know exactly where to look, but the stock price is currently 153.93. That means the nearest strike price is 155 and the second nearest strike price is 150. So if we concentrate our efforts there, let's just highlight those options. And what we see is that the open interest and the volume for those options, both on the call side and the put side, is vastly greater than those further away with the further away strikes. So the nearest three strikes have the greatest concentration of trading activity. The greatest concentration of trading activity is generally near the money. And as you can see, this is just a typical option chain, and here it is, right in front of you. Now let's drill down and see what the individual call and put activity is. As we can see, with the lower strike calls, there's hardly any open interest in volume, or not in comparison with the higher strikes. So when we've got these strikes of 155, 160, 165, 170, we've got 20 and 30,000 in terms of the open interest, and we've got thousands in terms of volume. But when we go to the lower strikes, the in-the-money calls, we've got much, much less. As you can see, it's very clear that the greater volume and open interest is happening with the higher strike, i.e. the out-of-the-money calls. And there's a similar thing with the puts, except for this time the out-of-the-money puts are the lower strike. So here's our at-the-money strike, say around 150, 155, and what we can see is that the volume and open interest for those lower strikes is significantly greater for the 150 to 145s, 140, 135, 130 strikes than it is for those higher strikes, i.e. the 160, 165, 170, 175. Again, this is just corroborating the fact that the out-of-the-money options are more heavily traded in terms of volumes and open interest than the in-the-money options. So let's now complete the basics for options, and the good news is that's all we ever have to do about options in this course. Options are traded in contracts. Now in the US, one options contract for stocks, or one stock options contract, represents 100 shares. So if the option premium you see quoted is $1.50, we would pay $1.50 multiplied by 100 equals $150 for each contract. Let's now talk about open interest. Open interest is the total number of option contracts that are open on a particular day which have not been closed or exercised. Now, open interest is an indicator of liquidity and your ability to create or exit a position. Open interest is not volume. It's not the same as the amount of options that are traded on a particular day. Option volume is the total number of option contracts that are traded on a particular day. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that you can have zero or very little volume on a particular day, but where there's plenty of open interest. That's because open interest refers to the option contracts that have already been opened and haven't yet been closed or exercised. Okay, so let's now complete the component parts of the OVI. Implied volatility. Well, implied volatility is a measure of the pricing of option premiums. The way it works is this. When implied volatility is high, that means option premiums are going to be more expensive. This is reflective of the greater risk of stock prices falling. When implied volatility is low, it means that option premiums are being priced low, and that's reflective of the greater chance of stock prices rising. So high risk is associated with stock prices falling, and low risk is associated with stock prices rising. Now, that's a very simple way of explaining implied volatility, and in fact it's a very simple way of explaining all of options. Implied volatility in particular is a massive science all on its own. So that covers the academic part of the OVI. Let's just do a quick recap here so that we can then go on to more exciting stuff. The OVI is a proprietary indicator created by me that measures the buying and selling activity in the options markets. We only use it in conjunction with tradable chart patterns like flags, like breakouts, and sometimes reversals as well. The OVI is closely correlated with medium-term price action and can sometimes forewarn a major move. It's also closely correlated with long-term price action. But the key is that when the stock prices are going sideways, it can sometimes precede where the stock will go. So I've actually jumped ahead of myself there. The OVI is especially useful in sideways markets where it can often indicate the most probable direction of the breakout. The OVI is a combination of option volume, option open interest, and implied volatility. The OVI tends to be roughly in line with the major trend of the markets. And you've seen plenty of examples of that already, and you're going to see a lot more. In the next section, we're going to go through another proprietary indicator of mine that specifically follows the hidden money being invested in the options markets. Now, this indicator is called the OBV. Again, it's completely unique to me, and again, you don't need to know anything about options whatsoever to understand the indicator and how it's going to help you.